Hello, and thank you so much for joining me once again. I am so excited about today's project. It was an experiment that was a success, and those are always great. I basically figured out a way to alter existing American Girl patterns to fit very different sized and shaped dolls. One thing I've noticed about dolls specifically is that you can't just shrink or grow a pattern to fit a doll, especially with ball joint dolls. You have such a vast variety of shapes that it just doesn't work very good. So I decided to come up with a method that accounts for that in some way to hopefully cut down on making 8 million drafts of the same thing. You still have drafts. You're always going to have rough drafts. But without further ado, let me show you my first experiment with it, which was actually a purchased pattern for a hanbok. The American Girl hanbok. I got it from Pixie Fair, and I will put a link down below. I did not record this at all because I thought it would be poor form to record altering a purchased pattern. It just seemed like a bad idea. I don't want to step on toes, especially since I think you should go and buy as many of their patterns as you can because they're amazing quality. I was super impressed. I had step-by-step instructions that I am not used to having, especially since I usually just make stuff up and hope it works. So definitely highly recommend them. I won't be showing you how to alter the hanbok specifically though, because I want to respect them. However, they do offer their own free patterns, presumably to show you just how great they are. So I thought, hey, that would work. So I downloaded one of their free patterns, I will link it below, and printed that off. And here you can see it on in its original form. I like this one because it was simple, so I can show the theory, and also because it's got a bit of rouging over the bust, the gathers over that bust, and I thought that would suit the doll that I'll be making this for a little bit better, since the American Girl dolls have a very childlike body. A lot of their patterns don't account for a bust because there is none. So that's going to be a little bit trickier, and I thought just to show you how the method works, we're going to simplify it, account for the bust ahead of time with the design of the pattern. So once you've got it printed off, I double checked that inch to make sure that it was exactly perfect, and it was, but I realize now in hindsight that's probably not super necessary because we're really just going for proportions at this point. But you know, if you're like me and do it by habit, it's a good habit to have. I cut out the two pieces that matter the most to me because the drawstring pieces, I'm going to just be using a ribbon for the drawstring. I draw in my seam allowance lines so I know where they are, and just kind of put everything I need on the back of the pattern pieces so I have an empty slate to draw on. I go get my doll. This time we're going to be making this for Esme, who is very unlike an American Girl doll, you'll note. Then what I start doing is actually measuring where each seam and edge is going to be. So you see I measure under her arm, and I write half of that on the pattern piece because the pattern piece accounts for half of her underarm. Then for the height, from the underarm down, I measure about where I want the dress to end. And then I do the same for the front. And I do this for every single edge of the pattern piece. So you know, I mean, it's going to get pretty complicated fast, but if you start off with a simple pattern, it might not be so bad. Now, for the gathers, I know that I need extra fabric for the gathers. So this is where I bust out a little bit of math. I did eventually decide to lower it just a little bit. I was worried that 15 centimeters would be too much gathering. I was glad that I did that in the end, so 2.5 might be a bit much, 2 point something. But anyway, I start drawing out the pattern piece now using the measurements that I have just taken and written down on the other pattern piece. And I like my big clear ruler a lot for this because it's solid, so I can use it to line everything up, get all of my lines perpendicular. The reason that I keep switching back to the other ruler is because my beautiful hard ruler does not have millimeters, and when I work at scales this small I prefer millimeters just because of the scale, and the math is so much simpler. So you can see me measuring all my things and trying to figure out what exactly my numbers are going to be for this. I knew this little piece was just going to be for finishing the arm seam, so I essentially just made sure it was long enough with a little bit extra, and then I took just a tiny bit of width out because the method for finishing is still, even at the smaller scale, we're still going to want that fabric there. Then I decided my measurements for my drawstrings based on how long they have them, and just wrote that number down. We'll figure that out later. So now we have a draft, and I jumped straight into using nice fabric because I knew this particular dress was going to need something drapey, and I have a lot of this stuff. So you can tell by what I just did there that the drawstrings were cut on the bias, so they're a lot stretchier lengthwise, where the the dress pattern pieces are not so stretchy up and down. And that's on purpose. That's how the pattern actually told you to cut it. And I finished my edges with fray check. I have yet to find anything that works better than fray check, unfortunately. I know some people don't care for the smell and it's not great, but it works really well, and especially for tiny seams and this kind of fabric that's very, very fray-y. It's a lifesaver. From this point, we literally just follow the instructions as they are on the free pattern. So we close up the side seams, and then hem the bottom. I do like to try to hem things from the top, with the right side facing up. I just think it tends to look a little bit nicer. It's not a hard and fast rule, depending on how easy I think it's going to be and how much fabric I have rolled up, but I figured I'd throw it out there. Now you can see my two little pieces that I cut on the diagonal. I have followed the instructions on the pattern, and I've ironed them both in half and then in quarters. And I pinned those to the underarm. And then when I sew, I use that ironed in crease as a guide. And I do like to take my pins out as I'm sewing. I know I see a lot of people just plow right over them, but I have broken needles that almost went in my eye that way. So definitely recommend taking your needles out as you're sewing. It is the safer option. Now the pattern piece had you fold the edge over on the inside so that it was all nice and you didn't have any raw edges. However, knowing that I had used Fray Check on all of the edges, I decided that that was just way too much work. So I just fold it over and pin it down, and the inside can have a raw edge. That's okay. It's the inside. At this scale, having it fray checked is, in my opinion, plenty good enough. So then you go back to your sewing machine, and with the right side facing up, you stitch in the ditch, making sure to catch that back side while you go. And then I must have lost footage at some point, but I also folded over the edge of the top enough to leave a casing for my 1/4 inch ribbon. And I sewed that down. I cut my ribbon out based on my measurements from earlier. I think it was like 40 centimeters. Sticking the ribbon in by itself is definitely not going to work. I go with I have safety pins everywhere, so I just pop a safety pin on and use that. I actually have special tools for this too, and almost never use them for that purpose. I like the safety pins. They work just fine. Sometimes though you have to encourage them a bit, hence the needle nose pliers. Even with the special tools though, sometimes you have to bust out needle nose pliers. Like, it's just a reality. It's because that edge is folded over on the inside, so it keeps catching on that. Anyway, since it's ribbon, I do like to finish the edges because they love to fray. My ribbon is all polyester, so that's why this works. Please do not try this with anything made of natural fibers. It will just catch fire. And then we get to put it on the doll. This was really exciting for me. I had no idea if it was gonna look nice or not. I was completely unsure, and it's actually looking super cute. I don't even think it necessarily needs the waistband. It's adorable either way, but I just use another piece of ribbon and make a cute little bow in the back. And it's actually super adorable. So definitely a super fun project. I'm so excited I got to share it with you. Please like and subscribe, and hey, let me know if there's anything you want to see. I would love to hear from you guys. Have a good one.